Yellow and Red Mix by Digits 27, Chapter 28. Despite the cold and rather uncomfortable ground, Yuya had to admit that it was a good sleep. She felt lighter today, as if a gravity suit had been released from her body after too many years of being active. Honestly, even she couldn't tell when it was she had started to like Naruto in that way. It was more of a gradual thing. Even so, she was always far too stubborn a person to ever admit such things. She couldn't be sure if Naruto finally finding out was a good thing, but something inside her told her it would be interesting to find out. She looked up from her position, rested on his chest, and stared up at his dozing face until reaching out a hand and lightly brushing it against one of his whisker marks. Ever since she had met him, they had fascinated her, making her wonder what they felt like. She found it odd when they didn't actually feel any different from the rest of his skin. They were slightly smoother, like the area around her curse mark, but they weren't raised or grooves like she would have thought. A smile graced Naruto's face when she brushed one of them, and he chuckled. She could feel the vibration through the contact with him, and it made her smile as well. Quickly she stopped stroking him, realizing how it might look if he woke up to her doing it. That in itself made her pause. How would it look? She was now his girlfriend. Did girlfriends do things like that? She didn't honestly know. She was as new to all this as Naruto was himself. It seemed her stroking had actually got into the boy, and he stirred before blinking his eyes open. Hey, Tayuya. He smirked back at him. Hey, shithead. Naruto groaned but still smiled. So you're still gonna call me that? She sat up with her arms crossed under her chest while pouting in a very Tayuya fashion, mainly in a mocking gesture. Until the day I drop. Naruto chuckled as well, but she didn't miss the frown that troubled his features when she said that. He sat up as well, looking out over the village and only just noticing the sun beginning to fall in the sky. Damn, how late do we sleep in? Tayuya shrugged, not really caring, as she figured the later the better. Uncle would probably be pissed and would know that punished them with training, not to mention tease the hell out of them when she found out, but a small part of Tayuya knew it was worth it. I don't know. Come on. She would probably go with Gara before he gets frustrated and take it out on some unsuspecting building. Naruto nodded, but suddenly smirked as he looked around at Tayuya. What are you looking at? His smirk grew. You just said an interesting sentence without swearing. Tayuya thought back and realized he was right. What? Fuck off, I didn't. Go shove your fucking head up your shitting ass. Naruto just chuckled while Tayuya blushed, both getting to their feet, but before they could take off, Naruto put a hand to Tayuya's shoulder. Tayuya. She looked around and seeing how deeply in thought Naruto looked. What do we do now? She frowned at him. What do you mean? I said we're going to find Gara. He smirked weakly but shook his head and motioned with his hand between them. No, I mean with us. What do we do now? Tayuya suddenly blushed as she remembered some of the things Temari had talked to her about. Jiraiya's perverted books supplemented that. I don't know. Naruto nodded his head in agreement. They really hadn't thought that far ahead. I guess we just keep doing what we normally do. If it feels right, I don't see why we should change it. Naruto nodded again, his smile gaining more confidence as he agreed with Tayuya's sentiments. However, if he could, there was one thing he would like to change, and to illustrate that he understood, he suddenly leaned forward and captured Tayuya's lips with his own. The redhead's eyes opened wide as she felt the urge to fight against the action, but her own words flashed through her mind. She realized that this felt, in a word, right. She closed her eyes and leaned into the kiss a bit more, but Naruto chose that moment to break from it, leaving Tayuya frowning. She opened her eyes to see Naruto smiling pitifully at her, making her scowl. Why'd you stop, shithead? She shrugged and leaned forward again, but she stopped his face with her hand, this time leaving him confused. She would be damned if he was the dominant one in this relationship. She gave him a mischievous wink before disappearing in a shunshin, leaving behind a dazed and confused Naruto. Women can be troublesome. He could have sworn he heard a cacophony of men sneezing coming from a particular house not far away, but shrugged it off as his imagination. He hopped down off the monument, taking his normal shortcut, but with an enormous grin plastered across his face. Tayuya laughed to herself for leaving Naruto high and dry, but he deserved it for breaking the kiss too early. He really was going to learn about these things, and Tayuya decided it would better if she weren't the one constantly correcting him. To her, it was a sort of test, and while she had her doubts about Naruto, she knew he would probably meet her expectations. After all, she had gotten him into those books for more than the pleasure of reading. If he didn't come away from them without any hints, then he was a hopeless case. Despite her earlier sentiments of finding Gara, she found she actually rather felt like being alone right now. She chose a random direction and started walking, not particularly caring where she ended up. It didn't even cross her mind when the streets began to get emptier and emptier until there was nobody but her walking through the barren walkways. She did notice all the strange fan symbols that littered the walls, though. They made her wonder if she had somehow stumbled into some kind of clan compound. That didn't make much sense to her, as if that were true, then there should be people walking about. It was at that moment she realized that she was the only person in about 100-meter radius. She couldn't see another living soul, and the streets were quiet and had obviously been vacant for some time. The place gave her the creeps, and she turned around to leave, and possibly find Naruto when she heard some commotion from the largest building in the area. Her curiosity piqued, and she made her way over to where she could hear voices and see lights. She hopped over the wall to see the strange sight. The Uchiha kid from the tuning exams was facing down four people, all dressed in the same ridiculous clothing. It was some kind of cream robe with a white yin-yang symbol, and for a belt they wore a thick purple rope wrapped in a pretzel knot at their back. She would have snorted from the idiocy it would take to wear such a uniform, but she didn't want to give her position away. There was a fat one with a bright orange mohawk, clearly the up-close and personal type. Next was a strange, thin person who Taiya could tell was male or female. Couldn't tell was male or female due to the green lipstick and blue hair. They were distinguished by a strange lump on the back of their head that looked like a second head. The strangest of them was a dark-skinned man with 6 arms, something the Yu found incredible. Lastly, and possibly most shocking, was one of the members of that girl Hinata's team, the one that Naruto fought in the preliminaries. And Tajiri crept closer to hear what they were talking about with Sasuke, not noticing as her foot lightly brushed a near invisible wire. Before she could even shoot out in surprise, she found herself enveloped in some kind of fast-hardening junk. Horrifically, she realized it was shot out from the 6-armed guy's mouth, which made her want to vomit. Sasuke and the uniformed ones all turned to look at what he had caught. The androgynous one with the lump jumped up next to her and stared down at her with a sneer. It looks like Hidemaru caught a little fly on the wall. Now identified as a man by his voice, he chuckled to himself before noticing the curse mark only half hidden by Taiya's shirt. Oh, and what's this? Aren't we lucky? He picked her up with surprising strength and carried her back down to his teammates. What is it, Sakon? It was the fat one who asked, and Taiya shot him a scowl, finding she instantly disliked him. Fuck off, fatso! The ginger-haired behemoth gained a take over his eye and started to march forward, his hands already curled into fists. Back off, Jirobo. This one is the one Lord Orochimaru told us to watch out for. Jirobo scowled at Tayuya before backing off. At least that told Tayuya that Sakon was the leader of the group. By now, the Uchiha would just looked impatient, tapping his foot irritably, making Tayuya wonder what he was doing with subordinates of Orochimaru. Will you idiots just stop bickering so we can go? Taiya tried not to show her surprise at Sasuke's defection to Orochimaru of all people. Oh great, you're a fucking traitor. Should have known a emo fag like you would want to be butt buddies with Orochi pedo. Sasuke scowled at her, striking her across the face with the back of his hand in anger at her outburst. Taiya by now was furious, but before she could retort, Hidemaru sprayed some more of that gunk over her mouth, silencing her. That would have gotten annoying. There was a round of nods that made Tayuya's twitch an eye in irritation. Suddenly, Hibiki, who hadn't spoken since Tayuya had gotten there, looked up from where he had been concentrating. We should leave now. There are faint vibrations in the ground, not far from here. Anbu are coming. The Sound 4 and Sasuke nodded before taking off with Tayuya over Sakon's shoulder, and Hibiki leading the way. Tayuya tried to shout out insults and curses at her kidnappers, but with her mouth restrained, all she managed were grunts and muffled noises. Eventually, they stopped in a clearing. Sakon was obviously annoyed by the girl's struggles and attempts at speaking. That's it. I don't care. Let's just put them in the coffins now. Taya's eyes widened, wondering what the hell they meant by that. Sasuke also seemed interested, raising an eyebrow at the word coffin. How is that supposed to give me more power? The Sound Four merely laughed before Jirobu produced 2 pills from a pouch. The coffins merely keep you from hurting yourself. These are what activate the second stage of the curse mark. Sasuke narrowed his eyes at that, but took the small pill anyway, quickly clamping it into the rounded coffin before swallowing the pill. Jirobu quickly clamped on the lid and hefted the weighted coffin onto his back. Sakon took the other pill and regarded Tahiya harshly, whilst she stared at the pill in his hand with fury. Sakon quickly ripped off the gunk from Tahiya's face, and before the girl could utter a sound, the man grasped her jaw, forced her mouth open, and shoved the pill in. Taguya went to immediately spit it out, but Sakon beat her to it, putting his hand over her nose and mouth so she couldn't breathe. Taguya struggled for a minute, but eventually her lungs demanded oxygen, and she was forced to swallow. As soon as she did so, Sakon released her, and she felt a burning sensation from her gut. Before it became too intense, she was hoisted up and shoved into the second coffin they had brought. The lid came down with a thud and was quickly sealed into place. Toya felt blinding pain before passing out. Finally, Kitamura lifted the coffin and the Sound Four took off again, hurrying to get back to their master in time. Naruto had caught up to Gaara and was happily chatting with his stoic friend when he suddenly dropped to his knees and grabbed his wrist in pain. Gaara could plainly see that the small petal mark imprinted on the blonde's wrist was glowing ominously. Naruto had to prevent himself from crying out in pain by biting down on his lip, drawing blood. Finally, the pain passed and he stood up shakily, looking back and forth before his eyes settled on Gaara. Taguya's in trouble. Naruto quickly took off with Gaara on his tail, both of their faces set in their determined and serious masks. As they quickly located the highest point in the area, Naruto stood on the tall tower and sniffed deeply in every direction, searching for some hint of Taguya's location. He came up with nothing. She was in a crowd, and he couldn't discern her scent, or she had left the village. He really hoped it was the former. We should inform the Hokage and get him with this. And get his help with this. As ever, Gaara was the voice of reason in stressful situations, and Naruto nodded lamely, following after him as they sprinted for the large building that dominated the village's skyline. It didn't take too long for the Jinchuriki to reach the Hokage Tower, and before long they were brushing past the Hokage security and bursting through her door. Tsunade looked at them over a stack of paperwork, immediately noting their very serious expressions. What is it, brat? Can't you see I have a stack of paperwork that's going to take all night to get through? Naruto just narrowed his eyes, not really giving a damn about a pile of meaningless sheets when his friend was in danger. Taguya's in trouble, and we need help finding her. Tsunade looked at him curiously. She had never seen Naruto this serious before. What kind of trouble? What kind of trouble? How do you know? Naruto growled in irritation. He didn't have time to explain. I don't know what kind of trouble. That's why we need help. He would have slammed his hands down on the desk, but there wasn't an inch of it not covered in various documents or forms. Look, brat, I can't help you if you don't even know what the problem. She was interrupted as an Anbu suddenly appeared in the corner of the room. Lady Hokage, 4 sound ninja were seen fleeing the village with one Sasuke Uchiha and an unknown red-haired girl who appeared to be bound. Naruto's eyes shot open and he smiled visibly, already making for the door. Naruto, wait! Begrudgingly, he turned and took his hand off the door handle, looking at the youthful Hokage expectantly with barely concealed irritation. Tsunade turned to the Anbu who had the mask painted to give the impression of a dog. Give me more information. The Anbu nodded quickly. Our intel places the Sound Ninja as the Sound Four, Orochimaru's elite bodyguard, also responsible for the Four Seal that prevented us from helping the Sound Team. It would also appear that the Uchiha was not bound in any fashion, apparently leaving of his own free will. Tsunade nodded, mulling the information over. How many Anbu are currently available? Even under the mask, everyone could tell the Anbu was frowning. None, Lady Hokage. All Anbu units are currently on missions or in their appropriate positions defending the village. Naruto snarled at that. If that was true, then how did the 4 ninja even get into the village? Tsunade also grimaced at the news. There was a similar situation with the Jonin as well. All were either with their squads or on missions. Round up available shooting and getting immediately. Have them in my office in 5 minutes. The Anbu nodded before vanishing from the room, leaving in irritated Naruto, who was consciously scratching the petal mark on his wrist. We don't have 5 minutes. They could be hurting Tayuya right now. Tsunade just turned to Naruto with the most understanding expression she could muster. Look, Naruto, I know you care about your teammate, but you heard that Anbu. They're Orochimaru's elite guards. You'll need some backup if you hope to take them on at all. Naruto growled, but couldn't escape the woman's logic. He irritably paced the room as he waited for the Anbu to return with the other shinobi. He didn't, but the other recruits quickly appeared in the room. In the end, the only ones the Anbu could find on such short notice were Kiba, Lee, and Neji. They were quickly informed of the situation, although they were more concerned with Sasuke's defection than Tayuya's kidnapping, much to Naruto's annoyance. He did, however, idly notice that Lee and Neji were wearing their village shooting flak jackets, which meant that one of them would probably be leading the mission. Considering he wasn't actually a shinobi of the leaf, finally they were all caught up and were running for the gates, quickly to get on the kidnapper's trail. Naruto was impatient and kept pulling ahead of the group as they sprinted across the village, constantly having to be recalled by Gaara. Lee could keep up with him, but he didn't have the same sense of urgency as Naruto did. Not to mention that every time he would try to run, our head ninja would pull him back, as Naruto had thought. The previously stuck-up Hyuga had been put in command of the mission. They regrouped at the gates of the village, with Naruto impatiently looking back and forth, just waiting for them to give him the signal to go. Lee could sense his companion's eagerness and walked over, placing a firm hand on his back. Don't worry, my friend. We shall retrieve your teammate and our wayward Sasuke. Just you wait. The words irritated Naruto more than anything else, but he offered a fake smile just to get Lee to go away. Neji had them come around so he could draw out the plan. A waste of time in Naruto's opinion. He and Gaara could take these guys on without problem, and the others would just end up dragging them down. Normally Naruto would have appreciated the help, but he was agitated, and if he moved at full speed, then only Lee might have been able to keep up. All right, we have no idea the abilities of our opponents. Therefore, when we approach, we should observe before we engage. Naruto growled at that, but reluctantly nodded along with the rest of the group. We should try and avoid getting separated if possible, but ultimately our objectives are the retrieval of Sasuke and Tayuya. Another round of nods from the assembled shinobi. We will move out now in a spread out in formation to cover more ground with Naruto and Kiba in the front, as they can track our targets. Gaara and Lee will be a bit further behind them as support, and I will take up the rear to watch out for any traps or tricks the target may leave for us. More nods quickly followed. When we get closer, we will slow down and assume a similar formation with Kiba in the front, followed by Naruto, followed by Gaara, and then Lee, and finally me. After Neji waited for the nods, he motioned with his hand and the group was immediately off. Naruto was extremely frustrated as he raced through the trees while Kiba was fast. He wasn't as fast as he was, and he had to limit himself to avoid getting ahead of the group. He and Gaara may have been a strong unit, but on his own he doubled being able to take on 4 possible junior level shinobi. He wanted to turn around and tell the Nizaka to get a move on, but he was more focused on locating Tayuya's scent, which proved to be highly difficult. Instead, he locked onto any familiar sense that he could tell apart from the more natural sense of the forests. Eventually, he caught something and took off in that direction, quickly followed by the rest of the group. A small amount of time later, and Kiba confirmed his suspicions, also picking up the unfamiliar scent. Naruto was still concerned that he was unable to track Tayuya normally, and couldn't help but worry what they had done to his girlfriend and teammate. After a few hours of tree hopping, the Sound 4 finally had to rest after lugging 2 heavy coffins on their backs for such a distance. Naruto grinned when he noticed this, but that quickly turned into a grimace when Neji ordered everyone to slow down and get into formation. They did so with a fair amount of muted complaining from the blonde, and they quickly approached the group. It wasn't difficult to avoid their traps with the aid of Neji's Byakugan. He even spotted the 3rd layer thanks to the trace chakra flowing through the strands of web-like substance. To this effect, they were able to creep up on their opponents undetected, and all gathered around on a tree branch to watch what was happening. The sound forges appeared to be resting against trees, catching their breath after such a strenuous run. Naruto also noticed that Neji and Gaara also seemed slightly winded, while he, Kiba, and Lee all still seemed full of energy. They took a moment to observe their enemies to see what they could glean, quickly coming to the same assumption that you had not been seen not have been seen, not foreseen, not a few hours ago. Unfortunately, Kiba couldn't help the gasp he let out when he saw Hibiki amongst the group, wearing their uniform no less, alerting the four to their presence. Immediately, the four had to dodge the webbing and Kidimaru shot out, diving from the branch into the clearing, where they quickly took up a loose defensive formation. Deji, where are Sasuke and Takuya? The Hyuga seemed to be concentrating extra hard on the group, his Byakugan flaring. I think they're in the coffins. All the Konoha shinobi glanced at him curiously, while not taking their eyes off the enemy who had yet to make a move. You think? It was Lechi who had asked, although they were all thinking the same thing. There is something blocking my Byakugan to a degree. I think it's the seals on the coffin, but I can't tell. Only one of their group wasn't really listening. Hibiki, what are you doing with them? The brown-haired boy merely smirked at his former teammate, sneering at the yipping dog in his jacket. Please, I was a spy for Lord Orochimaru this whole time. You idiots of the Leaf never suspected a thing. Kiba growled menacingly, soon joined by both Akamaru and Naruto, who was more eyeing the two coffins. Hibiki, hold these clowns off. We still need to make it to Lord Orochimaru on time. The Tenketsu controlling the boy nodded with a smile, still eyeing Kiba mockingly. The other members of the Sun Four had caught their breath and replaced the coffin on their backs before taking off. Naruto made a move to follow them, but was caught off by Hibiki. He managed to dodge the rather clumsy strike, but was still forced back. Fine, Saito, you want to go again? I'll whip you to shreds for taking Takuya. Naruto was about to make good on his promise when he felt a firm hand on his shoulder and looked back at Kiba with surprise. No, you guys go on. He looked at Hibiki with no small amount of disgust. I'll keep the traitor here busy. Naruto waited in a moment of indecision. However, upon seeing Kiba's determined but betrayed face, he nodded grimly. Picking off with the rest of the group, Hibiki made a move to cut them off again, but he was sent flying back by a vicious kick from Kiba. Your fight is with me. Hibiki narrowed his eyes, but smirked all the same. If that's all you want. Naruto spared a fleeting thought for Kiba as he ran on, but quickly erased it and focused on the tree branches ahead of him. They were only a few minutes behind the targets, and they were laden down, so the Persian shinobi had the speed advanced. Of course, they weren't expecting the ground in front of them to suddenly rise up into an enormous slab, forcing them to veer off to the side before it could descend and crush them. They regrouped as the dust settled, painting from the sudden attack. When the sudden smoke finally cleared, they saw the largest of the Sound Four staring at them, smirking. Naruto narrowed his eyes, working out what the group was doing. They're trying to delay us. We need to get to the coffins quickly. The others in the group nodded their heads in agreement while Lee stepped towards Jirobu. I will keep our opponent busy and watch my flames of youth against this. Naruto looked uncertain, but when Neji nodded at his teammate, Naruto couldn't argue. Fine then, but be careful. Once you deal with him, make sure to catch up. Lee nodded with an exuberant grin, raising a thumb forward towards his comrades as they sprinted off around the clearing, leaving Jirobu to face Lee. Ha! I won't even need my curse mark to deal with a pipsqueak like you. Lee just continued to smile as he settled into an offensive Yukin stance, his hand raised out in front of him, palm up. Let us fight! Naruto noticed their numbers had dwindled and knew it couldn't stay like this, or they would be weakened too much to help Takuya. Unfortunately, he was distracted and managed to run headfirst into a large web that spanned two trees, instantly getting caught on its gooey surface. He managed to keep one of his arms from getting stuck, but before he could warn the others, they met a similar fate, and each getting embarrassingly stuck like flies. The six-armed member of the group, Kidimaru, dropped down to a branch facing all three stuck shinobi. Ha! It's almost too easy. It's not even surprising anymore. How many people fall for a simple trick like that? Naruto struggled against his bonds, but found them to be unbreakable, at least to him. Neji just seemed to be examining them with his Byakugan, while Gaara had slowly looked out from his gourd, and was currently doing something Naruto couldn't quite make out. It's impossible. That webbing is enhanced with chakra, and you can't break it. Naruto caught the successive smirks from Neji and Gaara and figured they had found a way to escape. Not to be outdone, he summoned a kunai to his free arm and into his free arm and carefully launched it at the six-armed sound shinobi. Kitamura just moved his head to the side, allowing the kunai to pierce the tree behind him, smiling amusingly. Is that the best you can do? I would expect a little better from Chunin. Naruto shrugged, or at least to the best of his ability while stuck like this. Kitamura laughed again, but that instantly stopped when Naruto just vanished. His eyes opened wide in shock before a foot connected with the back of his head, sending him hurtling down to the forest floor below them. He managed to send out a web and swing out the bow of a nearby tree, only to see Neji and Gar standing across from him, also free. How? That's impossible! Both ninjas smirked, enjoying their opponent's confusion. Neji decided to explain first. Simple. With my Byakugan, I could see the chakra flowing in your webs. Using my Jukin style, it was simple to stop that flow, making it easy to cut with a finger strike. Kitamura's eyes twitched at the arrogant explanation as he looked across Gaara. You aren't the only one with chakra-infused substance at your control. That was all the explanation he was going to give the enemy. It was pointless to give away all his abilities. Neji stood up on the branch, motioning with his hands to Gaara and Naruto. So, I can deal with his webs easily now that I understand them. You two must rescue Takuya and confront Sasuke. The two Suna shinobi nodded. The pattern was unbroken. It was unbroken so far, so they saw no reason to do so now. Either way, there were two of them left, and only one of the Sound Four, the blonde and the red-headed, took off. Trusting in their companions to handle their respective fights. They had seen each one fight the Chunin exams, and all of them were more than capable. It would come down to just how dangerous their opponents turned out to be. It didn't take long to catch up to Sakon, who unexpectedly seemed to have split up into two people. The lump on his back vanished. Each carried a different coffin, so were markedly slower than Naruto and Gaara. Even so, they managed to outpace them long enough to reach a large open field at the center of the forest. The blue-haired man and his double turned wearily, unable to outrun their pursuers any longer. They placed the coffin down and turned to face Naruto and Gaara as the temporary leaf nin dropped into the clearing themselves. There's nowhere left to run. Both Sakons grinned at their opponents, turning to one another. You hear that, Ukan? They think we were running. Funny, isn't it, brother? They're just walking right into our trap like good little idiots. Naruto seethed at the flippant conversation between the two sound shinobi. Shut up and fight so we can kick your asses and take Tachuya back. Sakon and Ukan chuckled as they glanced at the containers behind them. Oh, brother, I do think the little leaf nin are too late. The other one nodded happily. I do think they're right, brother. Oh well, would you look at that? Sure enough, the coffins behind them began to spew an acidic purple smoke that drifted across the ground like dry ice. What are you doing to Takuya? The brother smirked again. He wants to know about stage 2, Ukan. Maybe we should show them, Sakon. The two large grins splitted the brothers' features as they finally turned around and dropped into a fighting stance and spoke simultaneously. This ought to be fun. End of chapter 28.